Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading for Labor Day weekend 2020. I'm a little late to claim that, but whatever. This is my first AM reading update of a new month, so I will start off by talking about my August literary newsletter. Every month on my personal blog, I compose a literary newsletter which includes some links to literary news that caught my fancy. I have a book pick, a book meme, a TBR of books that I might want to read in the future, and snippets from all of the Goodreads reviews of the books I read that month. I'll link that down below. Usually I don't talk much about books that I technically read last month, but technically also I finished this one in September anyway. It is Love by Toni Morrison. This is Toni Morrison's 8th published novel, which I read in part for Toni Morrison 2020, a Voxer book discussion started by Hannah at Hannah's Books. This was a powerful piece, like a lot of Morrison's writing. It centers in this Floridian town with a cannery and a hotel, and some of the interesting tidbits about all of this, especially the hotel, is that it was owned by a man named Covey, who was a well-to-do black businessman who during the Jim Crow South in the 30s, starting in the 30s, was able to put up this hotel for well-to-do black people to stay where they wouldn't be harassed, and that they could kind of have their own sort of society within this hotel. And in fact, the civil rights movement for Covey and his class of people was kind of destabilizing in a way, because they were doing kind of well in their own secluded, happy area. I mean, they occasionally have run-ins with, like, the police, it's true. And also Covey and his money came from somewhat backstabby, questionable sources to do with the U.S. government and tamping down dissent. But they were sort of able to have that facade of happiness that was kind of challenged and broken apart once the civil rights movement happened, and a new generation of black people wanted something different. And one of those people happens to be Covey's granddaughter, Christine, who gets involved with black liberation movements for a while, but that's not really what this is about. It's just some of the stuff that Morrison is commenting on, especially in these later novels, I think, because this one she wrote in the 90s, and it's set in the 90s, and it seems like, you know, as an older woman, by that time she's looking back on the history of black culture in America and black politics in America. And a lot of the women of her age are sort of judgmental of the women of younger ages, I think. Particularly the young women of the 90s with their hairstyles and their attitudes that are somewhat more abrasive and different. Same is true with the men. Some of the characters in the book are grandfather, grandson, trying to figure out how to talk to each other. But the main crux of the story has to do with the women of Covey's life. Well, Covey, by this point, has been dead for 30 years, and his once, you know, fabled, esteemed house is like the big man on campus, is occupied by his wife and his granddaughter, who are at a bit of a bitter, not so much truce with one another. Covey's granddaughter Christine and his wife Heed used to be best girlfriends back in the day, which tells you something about Covey's wife. She was much younger than him, and in fact he picked her and groomed her after the death of his first wife, basically to be a perfect replacement. So there's a lot of sexual politics, and that's not even like perhaps the most honest way to put it. There's a lot of really sexual abuse when it comes to grooming children to be sexual objects. But Morrison is telling this through her characters, and occasionally they think about it that way, but they're mostly self-serving in a way, like Covey thinking about what he's owed in terms of loyalty and allegiance, and Christine being bitter about the fact that sort of her place in the family line was overtaken by this other woman. Or young girl. And there's a lot of just backstory about how different their lives were. Heed herself is somewhat happy to be where she is because she was a very poor illiterate child who was raised up to have a powerful position as a matron. So yeah, by the 90s, these two women are really getting up in age, but Christine is still pretty paranoid that Heed will kick her out any day because technically the house is in her name. And Heed is paranoid as well and sort of trying to make a memoir for herself and consolidate documents and that sort of thing, for which she hires a young girl named Junior, who has a similar backstory in a lot of ways to Heed, and it seems like in a way Morrison is telling similar stories in different generations. Although Junior doesn't get into bed necessarily with a extremely well-to-do man, although she is a metaphysical aspect in this story, because she has some sort of spiritual relation with the spirit of Covey. So, although she is physically involved with a young man named Roman, who is part of a neighboring family raised by his grandparents, and his grandfather and Covey used to get together to fish and all of that. And they kind of offer the perspective of lower class people who used to work for the Coveys and that sort of thing. I'm not sure I'm convincing anyone of a plot in this. I'm not sure there is, like, it's a Morrison novel, so it's not really plot-centric. It's about characters and how they clash and how they deal with each other and the sort of sexual and political and racial politics that they have to deal with. It's about being oppressed as a black person, but the white people are really mostly off in the distance in this one. A lot more so than Tar Baby, which I first compared this to. I think the most tragic part of this story was Heed and Christine's relationship, and how Christine's grandfather really put a wedge into it. I mean, I pretty much blame him for how that went down, and that his attentions ruined the natural friendship between the two girls and turned them into enemies and rivals. Although within it tells us a lot of interesting things about sexual politics for women in a family. And Morrison in no way, makes either of these women simpering or victimized to the point where they don't grasp any power they can. And at the end, there is a little bit of a resolution, perhaps, for those two characters, which I found to be relatively moving. I mean, as usual, the writing is just direct and in your face and just very lyrical and demanding of that emotional attachment. I can see why Morrison is studied and beloved. Bad pun. My first official read of this month, at least that I can talk about, is A Highly Unlikely Scenario, or A NEETSA Pizza Employee's Guide to Saving the World by Rachel Cantor. This is a book that I've had on my Goodreads TBR for 5 years, ever since I read about it in an unlikely place perhaps on the Jewish Book Council website, although this is definitely a sci-fi novel, a dystopian satire where fast food companies rule the world. And I'm just a little bit into it so far. The main character, Leonard, is a listener, and that seems to mean that he works in a call center for complaints against the pizza company, because he has attributes that make him good for that position. Cantor is using a lot of, original phrasing, as dystopian authors often do, to make up their own brand of the type of issues they want to talk about in a Big Brother is listening sort of world, with overt corporate overreach that affects how people see themselves in their lives. I am also ostensibly reading this for Sci-Fi September, because I always want to take a little time out of my heavy literary fiction reading list to try out some sci-fi and fantasy. And I hope to actually review this book more completely and separately later this week once I finish it, rather than waiting for my next AM reading. And finally, next on my docket, I have 10 minutes, 38 seconds in This Strange World by Elif Shafak. Returning to literary fiction for this one, because I am reading it for the BookTube Prize. The BookTube Prize was started last year by Robert at Barter Hordes. The purpose is for people involved in the BookTube community to judge the best of literary fiction and nonfiction published the year before. So for all of 2020, we have been whittling down these long lists of fiction and nonfiction. We are now in the final round, and each division has 6 titles remaining, and 2 will be crowned winner in early October. I can't talk in more detail about any of this because I'm supposed to keep mum while the judging rounds are going on, but if you want more information about the BookTube prize, I will leave links listed down below. So that about covers it for me now. Just got back from Labor Day weekend. Well, spent a day and a half with my family in Baltimore, which was really nice. The first time I've seen them in about a month or so. But so far, September is kind of even keel, I guess, for coronavirus times, where not much is going on. Although I do believe if and when I return to work, it'll be kind of quick. That seems to be the way things go, but so far I haven't heard anything concrete. Just last month they said I might be going back this month, so... Tomorrow, I think I'll trek into DC to go to the library. I want to return this book, and then I have Morrison's 9th novel to pick up. Another one of my reading goals for September. Very excited. And I hope you're all excited by what you're choosing to pick up this month. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.